With authority. Aloha.
Welcome to the most must-listen show in Bay Area sports. This is ABC7 Sports.
With authority.
Big news. The Giants have a skipper.
Yeah, not much aloha in the introductory news conference. That was bizarre. I have seen police interrogations that have been more warmly received than Gabe Kapler's first few minutes with the press in San Francisco. This was not a surprise given the history, but the tone of the first few moments. I mean, usually these things, they're not quite parades, but they're just filled with hope and optimism and the new guys coming in, and this was more like, where were you on the night of August 15th? I mean, it was tense at times.
It sort of mirrored in a weird way the impeachment proceedings going on at literally the exact same time, which is not what you want when you introduce somebody to your team. And like when they first sent the tweet out saying Gabe Kapler's the guy, I mean, they instantly got ratioed. There was about 2,000 responses last time I checked, and not a lot of them are positive.
Well, it's to be understood, and I think what's interesting here is that Farhan Zaidi, it was his call pretty much, and you can just imagine, given what the Giants have been through this past year with the Larry Beil domestic abuse situation, or alleged, whatever you want to call what that was, they knew that the choice of Gabe Kapler was not going to be warmly received. So what that tells me is that Farhan Zaidi, having other options at his disposal, he must have felt like, this is my guy. Gabe Kapler is my ride or die, and that's what it came down to. I'm just surmising that based on logic. There's no other reason you would put yourself through this unless you totally believe that he was the right guy to take this organization to new heights.
Yeah, and we'll get into why he is the right guy. This isn't all doom and gloom. I know we started off pure fire on this thing, and we do have an extended interview with Gabe Kapler coming up in just a moment. So if you're listening, it's not all doom and gloom. We're going to present why this is a good thing and maybe why this could be a bad thing for the Giants. But I think the reason they went with him is because they truly did believe, and by they I should probably say Farhan, and to some extent the new GM Scott Harris, that he was absolutely the best guy for the job. That much better than the other people. And I think one of the main things that they saw in him was prior experience. He managed the Phillies. He did not have a great record with the Phillies.
No.
He got let go after just 2 years. So the track record isn't great, but having been a manager will help him this second time around. On top of that, this is an analytic-driven team now. Farhan Zaidi, Scott Harris, they're going to come in every day like, here are your lineups, here are your matchups, here's how you should play these situations. What I think they see in Gabe Kapler is a guy that will build trust with the players, build relationships with the players, build relationships with the front office. I think they think those are his strengths because the X's and O's type stuff, I don't know if you really have X's and O's in baseball, but you get what I'm saying, are pretty much predetermined. They don't need a manager for that.
Well, all of baseball has swung heavily in the favor of analytics, and you're an Oakland A's guy, and for years the criticism of Billy Beane has been that he's basically been managing the team from afar, and he decides who's going to play, how are we doing this platoon situation at first, or wherever in the outfield, and the manager is just there to execute his moves, everything that Billy wants. And so there's a bit of a puppeteer-like feel to some of these things, and it's widespread in baseball now. The Bruce Bochy types who, I'm going to manage with my gut. Those guys, there's only a handful left. And they're also some of the more expensive guys because they have World Series rings. This new breed, if you want to call it that, the younger managers that are getting opportunities, it feels like ownership and management in baseball has decided these guys are just not that important. I'm not sure that's correct. I tend to think the opposite is correct.
Yeah.
Because if you take the human element out, I think you run into problems. At the end of the day, we're all humans. And you'll hear Kapler recognizes that based on some of his Philly experiences. He's learned that it's not just about what the digital readout says.
Yeah, so I think that the relationships and the motivational factor and all the things behind the scenes. Like, you're not in the lineup today, here's why. The communication of that. You're going to be playing this position today, here's why. You're coming into this position in the bullpen, and here's why, is the most important thing a manager can do now. Be a counselor. Be somebody that can train people up. Be somebody that can explain why they're not being used today, even though they may think they're the best option. So I think that is really why they really see Gabe Kapler as the best option. He's a motivational guy. He's a smart guy. He did well with analytics when he was with Farhan in the Dodgers organization working in player personnel. Also, though, that is when a lot of the things came up in his past that were not very good, and that is why the press conference came off the way that it did. Now, to be fair to Kapler, we can recount these things and we can talk about exactly what happened, because if you're not following this stuff super closely, you might say, hey, they got their guy. This is awesome. Why were people so fired up in this press conference? So we will quickly detail that, talk about it, and then we'll play the interview for you as well. But when Gabe Kapler was the Dodgers director of player development in 2015, there was an incident. So a girl had been drinking with other girls and 2 Dodgers minor leaguers. One of them passed out in the hotel room. The other one apparently filmed as these 2 other girls beat up this other girl who was apparently a minor, 17 years old. The reason that they ended up getting heat, because when it came to Kapler, he, instead of running it up the chain or bringing it to the police, instead asked if they could all sit down and have a lunch. I think he saw it as a learning experience. That's how he explained it. But this was a bit more of a sensitive issue, and I think in like a victim type culture, you would see that as an intimidating thing, going to lunch with the players and the people, and you're not going to feel empowered in that situation.
Yeah, he admitted, and I think almost everybody would agree at this point, it would be naive to think that that would be the solution to that particular scenario. But he did ultimately hand it off to the Dodgers hierarchy and legal, and the same thing with the second situation that you're going to document here. I was surprised to learn that he and his then wife had set up a domestic abuse foundation. So this is a situation that he would have been uniquely positioned to handle, one would think.
Which maybe is why he wanted to do the lunch,
I know,
possibly, but it's just not the right way to go about it.
You know, when you say, okay, I would have done things differently, I would have called my mom, which he said in the news conference. When I heard that, I was like, oh, this is just getting worse and worse. His mother was running the foundation, and so perhaps she could have provided guidance. But I don't know that that's not the correct answer in that situation. I mean, the correct answer is, we have a serious situation here in our organization. All hands on deck. We've got to deal with
Run
this.
It right up the chain. Alert the proper authorities.
Right, and get everybody involved. Now, I'll say this, and you and I have talked this out. When you're in a large organization, large company, things come up, and there's an HR person that deals with certain things. There's legal that deals with certain things. We've had to deal with certain things where once you let those who are in charge know what's happening, there's not a lot you can do to impact the outcome. It's kind of in the corporate hands, if you want to call it that. So what I'm really surprised at is the Dodgers as an organization, and Farhan himself, they have not been grilled nearly to the extent that we saw in this news conference. And I really think the organization as a whole should be held more responsible than what we've seen to this point.
Agreed, and it almost seemed like Farhan knew this had to come out eventually and had to be dealt with eventually, and he almost welcomed the opportunity to really take it on in this press conference.
Well, he started the news conference
with all that. He did, because he knew it had to happen. Well, and they had to know this was going to happen when they made the decision to hire Gabe Kapler.
So you want to get to the second
incident? So there are 2 other instances before we get too far into the weeds here. So another instance happened in 2015. A Dodgers minor leaguer accused of an act of sexual violence against a woman on the housekeeping staff. Apparently the way the story was told is he had made advances to her and eventually grabbed her at some point. Kapler's response to that was to talk to the hotel manager. So again, same thing. Run it up the chain. Don't try to settle it on the lower level and bury it. Like, things
you have a responsibility.
Yes.
Well, especially when you've already been down this path before. One would think you would have learned from the first situation. And then
there was another instance where a group of players, including a top prospect not named in a Sports Illustrated report, were caught on surveillance confronting female guests, stalking, behaving strangely. So there was a pattern of behavior here. It wasn't just one incident, and I think that's why people were so up in arms with the decision. It showed a pattern of decision-making that could be considered pretty questionable.
So if you want to look at the negative side of this hiring, you would say on multiple occasions, Gabe Kapler used very questionable judgment in dealing with off-the-field issues. That coupled with lack of success on the field.
Yeah, 161 and 163 is the Phillies manager. Not winning when you just signed a $300 million player, and his only other time as a manager was in Single A with the Red Sox organization. He was 58 and 81.
So again, we
a losing record.
Come back to all of what I said in the beginning. It's puzzling as to why Farhan Zaidi felt like, this is my guy. I'm willing to walk through the flames and deal with all of the controversy because I think ultimately he's going to be the right choice. Now, whether that turns out to be the case, we'll find out.
And all this is in the past. They've hopefully learned a lot from it, and I think that you have to at least, I mean, it's tough, but you have to give Farhan some credit because what he's done since taking over, everything's been pretty good so far. So, I mean, he's shown that he has a track record of making good decisions. He's just laying a lot on the line with this one.
His whole reputation, I think, is on the line. If this goes south, then people are going to point to him and say, hey, you were the one pushing for this. The rest of us would have been happy with some of the other candidates. So we'll just have to see where it goes. But so we've laid this whole thing out. Let's hear from the man himself. ABC7's Chris Alvarez had a chance to talk with Gabe Kapler right after the introductory news conference.
Gabe, welcome to San Francisco. Congratulations on the job. Bruce Bochy, as he was going out, talked about, we asked him a lot about the next manager, and I asked him the question, why is this such a great job? And he said it's the best job in baseball. They're going to be a lucky manager. Your assessment, you haven't managed a game yet, but based on what Bruce said, what would you say?
Well, I had an opportunity to have a lot of conversation, or an extended conversation with Boch during the interview process, and I learned a lot about him. One of the things that he was just kind of playful about, like, he's a wine drinker, and I'm a wine drinker too. And he said one of the greatest things about being the manager of the San Francisco Giants is there's wine accessible everywhere. The other thing that he said is he was better his second time around, and that was an inspiring moment for him. And obviously, I'm going to take every possible opportunity to spend time with Boch and learn from his experiences. I think that can only make me better, and it's going to be impossible for me to fill Bruce Bochy's shoes. So, taking the cues from him and the inspiration from him, I'm excited about applying some of the lessons that I've learned as a manager of the Philadelphia Phillies and to being the San Francisco Giants manager.
You grew up in a day and played baseball where the analytics probably weren't as much of a thing as they really are prevalent now. How do you balance, as a manager, analytics, but also going with your gut? As a player, there's something to that too.
I think the way you balance it is by just as importantly as factoring in the tactical decision that you make when you have a lot of information. You have to factor in the confidence level of the players and weighting the confidence as heavily as you do the information. So if the matchup suggests that you have a better option to pinch hit for the batter that's going up to the plate, but you know that it's going to sap that guy's confidence that you pinch hit for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 at bats, it might not be the 5 or 10% better that you get with the batter that you're using to pinch hit might not outweigh the confidence of the batter that you're pinch hitting for. So finding a way to respectfully balance those two things, trying to weight them effectively and appropriately, I mean, that's the best thing we can do. It's not an exact science, certainly not black and white. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that I get really excited about.
When you were a player, what kind of manager did you like, and how does that affect how you manage a game?
I think the one thing that I liked about a manager is if they're even the same person every single day, I respected that. And so it wasn't going to, their personality types and their leadership style wasn't going to fluctuate with whether I was 10 for 10 or 1 for 40, right? Like I was going to get the same person every single day. So I remember being in the dugout and looking down to the end of the bench and seeing Terry Francona. And he always had the same easygoing demeanor. And I think that was a very calming thing. So that's the type of manager that I'd like to be, which is the same every day, very dependable for our players. They know what they're going to get. They're going to get energy, they're going to get accountability, they're going to get structure, and they're going to get support. And I'm going to bring those things to the dugout in the clubhouse regularly.
The roster is going to be built. There are going to be some guys that are here. There are going to be some guys that are not. What kind of impact do you have and say do you have in player personnel decisions like a Madison Bumgarner that's a free agent? What kind of decisions and what kind of say do you have?
One of the things that was really helpful in this process was knowing how Farhan Zaidi works. And because I had the opportunity to work with him in LA for 3 years as the farm director of the Dodgers, as he was the general manager of the Dodgers. And so what I witnessed is that he makes decisions. He makes the final decision, obviously, on roster construction, but he also does so in a collaborative way and asking a lot of questions and learning as much as he can and acquiring feedback. So obviously, Farhan is responsible for creating the roster on the field. At the same time, I think he's going to, I sense that he's going to ask for my opinion, my feedback, and take it seriously just like I do his feedback.
Would you like to have Madison Bumgarner back?
Of course. I mean, who wouldn't want to have Madison Bumgarner as a starting pitcher in your rotation? He's one of the greatest pitchers in San Francisco Giants history, and he's won huge games and is adored by fans and is one of the more tremendous competitors in baseball. I don't think there's a manager out there that wouldn't want to have Madison Bumgarner in his rotation.
This ballpark, we talked about the possible changes. Do you know exactly what they're doing out there in right center and how that's going to change things here?
I don't have exact specifications at this point. I do know that the bullpens were moved to make the ballpark safer, and I think that's the most important thing.
A lot of what you talked about and was addressed was trust. How do you gain the trust of the fans with some of the things that have happened in your past, and also with the players on some of the issues that you talked about inside?
Yeah, no, I think you don't earn the trust of people in a press conference or in one conversation or 5 conversations. It happens over a long period of time. It happens over sometimes several years. And I think one of the things that I'll fall back on is that in Philadelphia and in Los Angeles, as time went on, the fan base trusted me more, and the players trusted me a little bit more. And I certainly had some challenges along the way, but the front office in Philadelphia, the players in Philadelphia, they really learned to trust me because they saw my work ethic day in and day out. They saw that I was willing to walk the walk and do what I set out to do. And I think that's the most important thing you can do to earn the trust of people is to walk the walk.
You talked about this city and some of the fun of walking it and eating.
Yeah.
You're still in good shape. Look like you can play today. But how do you avoid some of the food out there? I mean, there's some good places to go out here.
I try not to avoid them. I try to dig in, and so I love pizza. I love ice cream. I love a glass of scotch at the right time.
Yeah.
And so I explore. Like that, how do I do it? I love the experiences that food has to offer, and I explore a city through its food. I learn about the culture through the food that's prepared in various restaurants, and I talk to people in supermarkets, and talk to people in coffee shops, and learn as much as I can about where they source their beans by way of example. I've always been fascinated by food. It's a part of me. Sensory experiences, food, music. Coffee, things like that.
What's something we don't know about you that hasn't been addressed, or is a fun fact about Gabe Kapler?
Put me on the spot a little bit.
Curveball.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked a little bit about it in my press conference, but I think one thing that is important to know about me is I really care a lot about people, and I am passionate about baseball, and I'm passionate about competing between the lines, and I'm passionate about winning every single day, and even some of winning conversations individually. But I don't think that is more passionate than I am about developing people and working to develop people.
In this division, the Dodgers have kind of been the kings for the last better part of a decade here. How do you overtake the Dodgers and get, in the NL West is very competitive, and teams that are coming up and getting this ballpark full and the vibe that we know that they had in the early 2010 situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that my job is always to get every last drop of talent and energy and enthusiasm of the players. I believe if we stay committed to that goal, and when I say we, I'm talking about the people who are under the clubhouse roof, every single day in and day out, over time we will develop a perennial contender a foundation that can support sometimes injuries, sometimes poor performance, because there's another line of defense behind that first layer that will compete in the National League West every single year in and year out. I think Farhan Zaidi is one of the more aggressive, intelligent, and competent executives in the game. Part of the reason I'm here is because I believe so strongly in his ability. I think Scott Harris is one of the best young executives in the game as well. I learned a lot about him through the interview process, so I think that the leadership is in place, and I think that those guys are going to go out and get tremendous talent.
Lastly, you talked about the honor of being one of 30 men in the world that have this job, the iconic Giants jersey. What does it mean to you to wear this uniform, the San Francisco Giants, and be the manager of this ball club?
A lot. It's hard to put into words. It doesn't come easily. Like, to wear this uniform and to put on this hat, it's humbling. And certainly it's one of 30, but it's not just one of 30. It's the San Francisco Giants, and the history of this franchise and the support of this fan base. It's a lot of it's some pressure, and I love that pressure to live up to being a great leader in this town, and I'm excited to take that on.
Gabe Kapler, thanks for your time. Thanks. Opening day spring training, that's all really, really soon.